Okay, hello everyone. Again, welcome to the Applicants webinar for the 2015 National Crime Victim Rights Week Community Awareness Project. As I mentioned earlier, we have an awful lot of people who have registered for the webinar, and so we'll have more people logging in, but I wanted to get started. Just to explain, and I'll probably be repeating this throughout, the webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on the website for the National Crime Victim Rights Week Community Awareness Project, which is cap.navaa.org. I'll just do a brief instructions. Because of the number of people that we have on the webinar, everybody's sound will be muted. We encourage you to ask questions. On your control panel there should be a box that either says chat and one that says questions. We'll be taking questions depending on the question and where we are in the program. We'll either try to respond at the time the question is asked, or at the end of the presentation there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. So if you want to hold on till the end, there'll be an opportunity to submit your questions then. Again, it will be recorded. You see the web address there, cap.navaa.org. We will post the recording and the PowerPoint slides. So you don't have to ask that question, which we usually get at these webinars. We will be covering a variety of information. The purpose of this webinar is to help you submit a very strong application. Given the interest this year, we expect this to be a very competitive process, and we'll explain the process a little bit later. But we do want, there's no secrets. We want you to submit strong, worthy applications to make our job difficult in selecting the projects that will be funded. To get started, I'd like to take one poll to find out how you found out about this funding opportunity. So if you would, just indicate the one of these that you may have found out about the funding availability. This will help us in the future to make sure that we provide the widest range of notification about the availability. Sometimes the program isn't available till later in the year. This year we were able to make it available earlier. The NAVAA listserv announcement is a listserv we maintain throughout the rest of the year, where you can subscribe to get the notice of availability. So we'll just take another few more seconds. Okay, if you want to vote now, please do. We're going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. The state VOCA administrators by about a 2-to-1 margin over other resources. That's very interesting. For those of you who don't know, NAVAA is the National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators. We are the people in each state that administers VOCA formula grants, and we manage this program on behalf of the Office for Victims of Crime. So we rely on the state administrators heavily for disseminating information about the program. Okay, again, my name is Steve Doreen. I'm the Executive Director of the association. The project director for the community awareness projects is Brenda Noel, and Brenda will be conducting most of this this presentation. We also have a consultant who will provide technical expertise and assistance to selected projects. That's Ann Seymour, who's a well-known victim advocate who has been involved in National Crime Victim Rights Week activities and resource guides for ever since it got started. Ann is a wealth of information and assistance. And also overseeing the project for the Office for Victims of Crime is Olivia Grew. And I'm going to ask Olivia if she would say a few words.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks to Steve and Brenda and Ann. I've worked with them in the past, and this has kind of become a well-oiled project that keeps getting better and better with age. I just want to first be able to say that the 2015 National Crime Victims Rights Week theme is engaging the community, empowering victims, and I don't have a logo or design or any colors yet. Those are going to be decided soon, but I just wanted to share with everybody the theme, and one of the main focuses this year is going to be around the 30 years since the passage of VOCA. I just want to thank everybody for your interest in this project. It's very exciting. I'm really happy we decided to do this kind of kickoff webinar to help everybody kind of structure your application, answer any questions in advance. And I just also wanted to let everyone know that if you ever have any questions about applying or about National Crime Victims Rights Week or even the resource guide, you can always contact me. And I also wanted to put a quick plug in for the 2015 National Crime Victim Service Award nomination process, which is still open through the Office for Victims of Crime. It closes on August 6th. And this year we've added a new award category, Vision 21 Crime Victims Research Award. So all of the information about submitting a nomination for someone worthy of an award is on OVC's website. Again, thanks so much for your interest in this project, and I hope you have a successful webinar, and I hope you have a smooth application process. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Olivia. I'm now going to turn it over to Brenda Noel. Brenda is the project director, and she's going to be taking you through the bulk of this presentation. Brenda?
Hi, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for having me today. My name, as Steve said, is Brenda Noel. I'm the project director, and I am available for any questions or clarification or any information you might need as you go through this process. And right now I'm going to walk through the application a little bit and try to give as much guidance as possible to enable you to draft a strong application. So the bullets that you have in front of you, the 1 through 7, is an overview of what we're going to talk about in the next 40 minutes. And we're going to begin with some background information on the CAP funding. So as Steve already mentioned, the funding is administered by NAVA, which is the National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators, under a cooperative agreement with OVC. The website for this particular funding can be found at the URL on the screen, cap.nava.org. The maximum amount of reimbursement for these grants is $5,000, and we expect to fund at least 60 projects. So the purpose of this funding is very specific. It's to increase the general public's awareness of rights and services for all types of crime victims. And we're specifically looking for this to happen during National Crime Victim Rights Week, which in 2015 is from April 19th to the 25th. Typical activities that are funded through this grant are public events, and what we mean by public events is they're in person, they're open to the public. Mass media advertising, such as billboards, websites, bus banners, printed materials, and promotional giveaway items, which can be t-shirts, tote bags, keychains. We've seen a variety of things fall under promotional giveaway items. What is not funded with the CAP dollars is professional trainings, purely private events that are not open to the public, Any ongoing activities that you would hold regardless of whether or not you received CAP funding, and non-Crime Victim Rights Week recognition events. We're specifically looking to promote Crime Victim Rights Week with this funding. Organizations that are eligible for this funding are public agencies, nonprofit agencies, community-based victim service organizations, faith-based organizations, tribal organizations, as well as community coalitions. One thing to be mindful of is nonprofits are not required to have a 501c3. Organizations must have a DUNS number, and the URL on the screen explains where you get more about that and where you can find your DUNS number. And we do not expect community coalitions to have a DUNS number. They're the only groups that are exempt from that. We cannot accept applications from individuals or for-profit entities. And previous recipients of CAP funding are eligible, but we are giving preference to new applicants or not recent applicants. So what exists as a resource is the Crime Victim Rights Week Resource Guide. You know, I do want to clarify, I just said not recent applicants. I meant to say not recent recipients. So it's not that you've recently applied, but if you've recently received funding, priority is going to be given to new applicants. So moving on to the resource guide. The resource guide is available to you. Its contents contain victimization statistics, special event ideas, camera-ready art files, a motivational DVD, as well as customizable posters, including Crime Victim Rights theme poster. It's important to note that the resource guide is not produced or distributed by NAVA. Everybody who applies for CAP funding will be receiving a copy, and we anticipate the resource guide will be available in early 2015. And as Olivia mentioned when she started, that the theme for this year's Crime Victim Rights Week is engaging communities, empowering victims. The art and the logo and the colors are not yet available, but they will be available in early 2015, and you will find those resources in the resource guide. So let's take a minute to look at the timeline. Important dates for you to consider are that applications are due on August 1st, 2014. We anticipate making decisions about applications by the mid to the end of October, and notification of awards will be sent out the first week of November.
Okay, Brenda, before we go on, we have a couple of questions that I'd like to respond to.
Okay.
At this time. Again, the website that we will post both the recording of this webinar as well as the PowerPoint slides is cap.navaa.org. We have a question whether governmental agencies are available to apply. State and local governmental agencies are, federal agencies are not, but otherwise public agencies or governmental agencies at the state or local level may apply. There's a question about how recent is a recent applicant. As Brenda said, it's not so much the application as those who have received funding. There's no hard and fast guideline. Many of the criteria, as you'll see, are sort of relative to other applicants. It's a competitive process. So if there's an issue, say two sort of equally strong applications and one has been funded in the last year and the other one hasn't been funded at all, the one that hadn't received any funds is probably likely to get a preference. So I think that answers the question about what's recent. There's some other questions, but we'll be covering some of that stuff as we go on. Why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay. The next part talks about the general application instructions. So the application is available on the URL listed on the slide. It's available in two formats. One is a PDF. The other is in Microsoft Word. Both formats you're able to fill in, and both are downloadable. In addition, what you're going to find at this website is your applicant's guide. Things to pay very special attention to. Your application must be provided on the forms that are part of the application. You cannot use different forms. You must complete all sections of the application. It's imperative that you read the applicant guide. There's significant and important information within the guide that will provide clarification and make your application more competitive. We ask that you not include any additional pages, any additional information, or any additional letters of support. We ask that you copy your application and retain a copy for your own files. Your application must be received by Friday, August 1st, 2014, and upon receipt, you will receive an email acknowledgement from me, ideally within a few days. If your application comes in on August 1st, you might want to give me 3 or 4 days, because I'm imagining we're going to get a lot towards the end.
Yeah, let me just interject. We usually get deluged with applications on the very last day. And so I would strongly encourage you to submit your application as early as possible so that you will get an acknowledgement. If there's some issue, sometimes there's some technical problems. If you don't get an acknowledgement right away, it could be that there's a problem. So by submitting it earlier, you'll have a chance to correct any problem along those lines.
Mm-hmm. That's a good reminder, Steve. Also, if you don't hear from me in 3 or 4 days, don't hesitate to email me or call me. It's important that you receive confirmation that we have your application. Okay, this slide talks about tips to ensure that your application is competitive. First and foremost, I can't stress this enough, just read and follow the applicant guide. That's going to be critical to your success. Do not exceed the allowable number of words for each narrative question. These forms are designed that you are able to copy and paste into the form. Please don't get fancy with bullets or special characteristics. It makes it more difficult to read and review. Be as concise as possible. Avoid any unnecessary superlatives. And what we ask is that you focus only on the specific proposal or project that you're seeking funding for. Do not include extraneous items that are not part of the CAP funding request. Provide only the information that we're requesting, and be mindful of what is and is not allowable. And last, and certainly not least, please check your math on your budget. The next part, we're going to go through section by section instructions on the application. It is a very concise application, so it shouldn't be too cumbersome. The first section is your organizational information, and I want you to just pay special attention to the applicant agency. That is the name of the organization that's going to be signing the contract and specifically being the steward of the application and if funded the grant funding process. If you have an organizational name that's something like Victim Services or something that might be common, we experienced this last year, we do ask that you distinguish yourself if you're Victim Services of Massachusetts or somehow distinguish yourself by your location so that there's no confusion in your application. In addition, we ask if you are the organization that's to be listed as part of a community coalition that you try not to make your name too cumbersome, such as doing business as with an extensive name after that. Just be as concise as possible. It's in this section that we specifically ask for your DUNS number. And I also want to have you pay special attention to the question that is second from the bottom where it says, is the agency or organization suspended or barred from receiving federal funding? Please be sure to answer that question. Okay, the next section, we're specifically looking for your organization's experience with providing and advocating for crime victims' rights and services. This is not necessarily specific to your project, but it helps us understand what your area of expertise is and how long you've been providing these services. Section 2 is the project description, and this is the section that we're going to be taking a close look at, so it's important that you be as concise as possible. And what we're specifically looking for here is we want you to describe how the funds will be used to promote or enhance general public's awareness of the rights and services for all types of crime victims, specifically as it ties into National Crime Victim Rights Week. We're also looking for you to identify the target audience and the geographic location. And if you are going to be conducting several distinct activities during Crime Victim Rights Week, we ask that you separate them according to the distinct activity, and for more information on that, you'll see the activities listed on the applicant guide. So we're looking for you to separate them according to type of activity and the date or dates in which that activity will be implemented. Section 3 is the budget, which we will take a very close look at, so the more specific you can be, the better in terms of the item description. It's broken out a little bit differently this year, where the first section is the item description, the second section is quantity, unit cost, and amount, and this lends itself to break down any promotional items that you might be purchasing with CAP funds. For example, the item description might be t-shirt, your quantity might be 100, your cost may be $7 per unit, so your whole amount would be $700. Right, doing the math in my own head. The bottom section is a space for any additional explanation you might want to offer for a calculation. And as much as you can break down your items here, what isn't helpful for us is if it says promotional items 200 with a unit cost and the total amount without any specific details about what those promotional items will be. We're asking for you to be as detailed as possible in this section. So section 4, we're looking specifically for you to talk about how you're going to incorporate the theme, the logo, and the colors. And we recognize that at this point, all that information is not available. So we're looking for you to just reference in the proposal how they will be used, not specifically the content, but where we will look for that information, the logo, the colors, how you might utilize them in your project. Section B talks about your major co-sponsors or collaborating organizations, and this is specifically on your project. We're not looking for organizations that you may collaborate with on an ongoing basis, but which community organizations or co-sponsors are you going to be pulling in specifically for your Crime Victim Rights Week CAP project. And Section C, we're looking for two things. One is your involvement of victims or survivors in your project planning, as well as involvement of members of a specific population for which you might be targeting. And the last section, which is important not to forget, is the certification. And there's a couple of ways you can certify your application. The first is that you can print your name, title, and date and then sign it. And you can scan it to get it into us or fax it or even mail it. And the second is there is an opportunity to provide an electronic signature, in which case you would print your name of the authorized representative, the title, the date, and then you would X the box there, which signifies an electronic signature. There's 3 ways to submit your grant. One is by emailing it us to cap@nava.org. And also, if you're working on a PDF file and you click the electronic signature, it then gives you an option to submit directly from that page. And if you press submit, it generates an email to cap@nava.org. You also have an opportunity to fax it in at the number listed on your screen. It's important if you do fax that you check the clarity of transmission and be mindful of hearing a confirmation from us. And the last way is you can also drop it in the mail, and the address is listed on this screen. And just a reminder, your application must be received by close of business on August 1st, 2014. Okay. Do we have any questions, Steve?
Yeah, but why don't we go on? I just want to emphasize a couple of things about the application form. It really is meant to be very concise and to the point. Each of those sections, and you'll see this in a bit, other than the description and, about the organization itself, but each of those sections are going to be reviewed and scored. Each of them relate to the criteria used to make recommendations and funding decisions. Don't assume because you address something in one section that it will necessarily be remembered in another section. So be very concise. You don't have a lot of words. It's a $5,000 grant. It's not a $100,000 grant. We expect to get many applications in, so the more to the point you can be, the more descriptive you can be, the better off it will be to evaluate the projects. Also keep in mind that each element needs to be related to what we're funding. As Brenda said, we're really focused in on where the dollars are going. So we'll be looking at what you say you're going to do and compare that to the budget that you're proposing. So everything in the budget should be described or explained in the narrative portions of the application, but don't go beyond that. Don't talk about things that will not be funded with the federal dollars that you're asking for. Okay, we do have a couple of questions. One, can we deliver the application in person? If you live in Madison, Wisconsin, sure. Anywhere else, you probably don't want to do that. Please define close of business. What is close of business? Because we cover different time zones, we'll really accept anything that is received by the next morning. So anytime overnight, if we receive it by Saturday morning, we'll accept it. Let's see. There are a number of other questions here, which I think we may refer to later on.
Okay.
Let me just take a close look. A couple of these are the same question. Okay, let's go on.
Okay, the next section we're going to spend some time talking about allowable and unallowable costs. We're going to start with what is an allowable use of CAP funding. Designing, producing, and purchasing of mass media advertising is allowable. The design, production, and distribution of printed materials is allowable. Purchase of promotional giveaway items, such as trinket, the larger word for that is trinkets, is an allowable cost, but please be mindful that it must contain the National Crime Victim Rights Week related message. Now, it can share space with your organization, but it must contain the NCVRW messaging. If you are going to purchase trinkets, tchotchkes, they cannot exceed a $20 per unit cost, and this includes setup and shipping. So one way to calculate this is the initial setup cost, and then the per item after the initial setup cost is paid for is automatically. You need to divide your setup costs and your shipping costs among the number
Brenda, I think we lost. Brenda, why don't you repeat that? I think we lost your sound.
You're allowed to purchase recognition awards as long as they don't exceed $50. So if you're purchasing trinkets or giveaway items, they cannot exceed $20 per unit, and that includes your setup and shipping costs. There can oftentimes be a significant setup cost in the beginning, and that cost has to be divided and distributed among the items, and the same goes for the shipping cost. It has to be divided and added up to the item so that it does not exceed $20 per item. Recognition awards is an allowable cost. They cannot exceed $50 each, and for recognition awards, we're really looking for plaques or certificates. These cannot be monetary awards or gift cards. We're looking for something that's meaningful and relevant to the event. Event speakers are a reimbursable cost. And I want you to pay special attention to this because this number has changed from last year. Your fee for an event speaker cannot exceed $650 per day for total cost. If you remember in the past, that number's been $450. It has been increased this year to $650. But please be mindful, that has to be the total cost. You are not able to augment that cost with agency dollars. It has to be $650 for the speaker for the day. Reasonable travel expenses are also reimbursable. They must be, those travel expenses must be in compliance with your agency policy, and they're not to exceed the federal travel regulations as well. And to find out more about what the per diem allowances are in your area, go to the URL that's listed on the bottom of this slide. Okay, additional allowable costs include consumable supplies and commodities, and those, what we mean by consumable are things that at the end of the project will be used up, such as paper, pens, tape, those types of resources. An allowable cost also includes rental or lease of essential equipment. And equipment falls under the category of anything that has an expected life of more than 1 year. It's important to note that we are not going to approve the purchase of equipment unless you can demonstrate that that equipment cannot be borrowed or donated, and that a purchase is more economical than a rental or a lease. Allowable costs also include rental of space and AV costs. Combined space and AV costs cannot exceed $25 per person per day. So for example, if you're having an event where you're anticipating 100 people will be in attendance, your space rental and your AV costs cannot exceed $2,500 because that would be $25 per person in attendance. As you're considering rental of space, we're asking that you document comparison of at least 3 facilities. You don't have to submit those to us, but you just have to make a good faith effort that you did seek out the most competitive pricing for the space that you're utilizing and that there's a rationale for why you chose the space you chose. The next section we're going to cover is unallowable costs, and these are things that you cannot spend cap dollars on. The first is agency salary or staff time, agency organizational, administrative, indirect, or overhead costs, any food, beverages, or refreshments, and let me just repeat that, any food, beverages, or refreshments are not an allowable cost. If you plan on incorporating food into your event and you're going to have it donated or from another source, for purposes of our review, it just makes sense not to include that in your application. If you include unallowable costs in your application, it just muddies up the waters for our review process. So we discourage you from including anything that's unallowable in your application. Entertainment costs, including attractions to induce attendance at events. Now this one's a little bit more nuanced. If you're having a gospel choir come to your candlelight vigil because it's going to enhance the experience, we don't consider that necessarily entertainment, and we would consider that an allowable cost if it's enhancing the experience and critical to the event. If you're renting a bounce house to entice families to come to your victim rights resource fair, that would be considered entertainment and would be an unallowable cost. And I recognize that that's a nuanced distinction, so please feel free to email me or call me to talk through some ideas you might have. Any and all fundraising activities are unallowable. And it's important to note if you're using language in your application like raffle, silent auction, anything that might raise a red flag that it's a fundraising activity, it's important for you to distinguish in the application that it's not a fundraising activity and specifically talk about the purpose of that event and how it's distinguished from a fundraising activity. We had an application in the past that talked about door prizes, and that as long as it's not used for fundraising and depending on specifically what the prizes are and if they meet allowable costs, that's very different from a fundraising activity. So what we're really saying here is just if you think it looks at all like a fundraising activity, please provide an extensive explanation so that we understand and the reviewers understand it's not a fundraising activity. Any and all bar charges or alcoholic beverages are an unallowable cost. Monetary gifts, cash prizes, or gift cards are not an allowable cost and cannot be purchased with TAP funding. Professional training is not allowed on this grant, as well as lobbying. There is a little footnote here that unallowable items will not be reimbursed even if they're included on the budget and the budget is approved. If it's possible that we don't understand, that it becomes clear to us as the project goes on that something would qualify as an unallowable cost, we will then be following up with you, and it will not be reimbursable if it fits the description and the definition of an unallowable cost. So this is a quick slide about some reminders. It's important to note that food or beverages are not an allowable cost, and if they are donated, this must be clearly identified. As I mentioned before, it would really be in your best interest to not include any unallowable costs in your application because it usually just causes confusion for us when we're reviewing. Space, we're asking for you to get at least 3 bids, make a good faith effort that you are getting the most competitive space or a space that fits a particular purpose. Your combined cost of space and AV cannot exceed $25 per person per day. Any promotional giveaways must contain a message related to the National Crime Victim Rights Week. Promotional giveaways cannot exceed a $20 unit, including setup and shipping, a $20 cost per unit. Prizes or acknowledgments cannot include cash or gift cards. Any recognition award cannot exceed $50 per person. And it's important if you're doing recognition awards that you not clump them all together on your budget, but distinguish them so I can read when I'm reviewing it how many recognition awards are included in that particular line item. Speaker fees cannot exceed $650 per day, and this includes any non-federal funds or additional funding. You're not able on this grant to pay a speaker more than $650 per day. A note about program income, which can be very confusing, so please feel free to follow up with me or we can clarify on this webinar. Program income is considered any fee or charge to attend or participate in a Crime Victim Rights Week CAP event. If you are charging a fee, it must be approved in advance and requires separate accounting on your part. The fees that are charged must be used for Crime Victim Rights Week CAP project or reduce federal funding. So let me give you an example. If you're having a 5K road race to raise awareness and bring the community together, and you need to charge a $5 entrance fee to cover specific components of that road race, like a police detail or garbage removal, if it's tied into the event and it is not a fundraiser, it is an allowable cost, an allowable charge, but it's important to note that it's not a fundraiser and that you're not making money off that registration fee, but it is to cover the cost of the event. And that is something that's important to distinguish right in your application. And when you go to do the accounting on that, that you keep that separate and clearly delineate that it's program income that was generated to cover the cost of the actual CAP project.
Let me clarify that. If it's a cost for an item, let's say, to use the same example, it's a 5K and you're giving out water bottles, but you're charging for the actual cost of the item, that the amount charged is actually covering the actual cost, then that would not be considered program income. If you're charging a general cost to participate, then that is program income and must be reported separately and either used with our approval to roll it back into the project itself, or it will reduce the amount of federal funds that you'll be reimbursed. I would strongly discourage any program income because it does get complicated, and these are federal rules regarding what is and what is not program income and how it has to be treated. This is not something that we dreamt up.
Okay, the next section we're going to talk specifically about the application scoring and project selection. So this following slide breaks down the point structure of all the sections on your application and how they'll be scored. So 5 points is allocated for the organization's experience in victim issues. 30 points is allocated for the project narrative in terms of clarity and conciseness and how much it's in alignment with the vision and purpose of CAP funding. 20 points is allocated towards the budget, and again that speaks to how detailed the budget is and how it aligns with the project narrative and the purpose of CAP funding. 10 points is allocated for using the theme, logo, and colors. 20 points is allocated for your ability to illustrate collaborations. And 15 points is allocated for your victim survivor involvement in the planning process. Additional considerations when reviewing these grants are the extent to which the project addresses rights and services to all victims of all types of crime. We are ideally looking to fund at least one project in each state, and as we previously mentioned, we're looking to fund new or not recently funded projects. And just to give a little bit of background of how the review process works, recommendations are made by the NAVAA board, but the final decision for all funding is made by OVC. We anticipate these decisions to be made by the end of October, and that funding notifications will go out in the beginning of November, and all applicants will be notified of funding decisions. And the last section is for questions.
All right, we have a number of questions, and I'm just going to go through them as they've come in. Is there a certain program type that will increase chances of a successful submission? I don't believe so. We've funded all different types of programs. Again, the emphasis is on programs that increase the general public's awareness of victims' rights and services. The closer you can come to meeting that goal, the stronger your chances are. Again, the website, we will post this webinar and the slides at cap.navaa.org. Okay, here's a question that the person is with a multi-state agency and serves communities in 3 different states. More than one of our offices receives VOCA support. You don't have to be a VOCA recipient to be eligible to apply. The question is, can multiple branches within this agency apply or compete, or will you accept only one application per agency? I don't think we've encountered a situation where an agency serves communities in more than one state. Generally speaking, we only accept one application per agency. Seeing if they are separate, discrete projects. I'm making this up because we haven't faced this situation. But I suppose if you're proposing completely separate projects in each of the 3 different states, we might consider them as 3 different applications. Of course, then you'll be competing against yourself. So that may be, you know, you're probably in a better position to judge the strength of your proposal if you were to have one application that proposed serving multiple communities versus multiple applications serving one community each. I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but I guess that would be an interesting situation. Question is, so the grant has to affect, quote, all victims of crime, meaning all types of crime, or can it be one specific crime or 2 or 3 crimes? This is a relative thing. To a large extent, we're going to be evaluating the proposals based on the extent to which the proposal serves multiple or all victims of all types of crimes. That is not to say we have not and we will not fund proposals that serve one type of crime. This is a relative concept. All I can say is the more types of crime victims you propose, the stronger your proposal will be evaluated. I think I've answered that. Would a large university population for an event provide enough exposure to be considered public versus too specific an audience? Again, this becomes a relative matter. The broader the proposal, the more the more general the target population, the stronger it will be. I can't give a definitive answer because it's something that reviewers will take into consideration. Okay, I think I've answered that. Please repeat the theme. The theme is, what is the theme?
Engaging community, empowering victims.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We just found it out, so I don't remember it. Do recipients have to pay the costs out of pocket and then reimbursed, or will funds be distributed to recipients for use? This is a reimbursement program. Again, it's $5,000 limit, so we cannot provide the funds up front. One of the practical problems for us is, since this is a federally funded program, our organization is ultimately responsible to the federal government. If we fund 60 plus projects, and in fact we will probably be funding more than the 60 that all occur at approximately the same time, there's no way that we can be assured of everything that's going on. It would be very difficult for us to try to recoup money that's not spent than to use a reimbursement approach. So this is a reimbursement program, and for those who get selected, one of the requirements will be for you to have to document to us that you actually carried out the project. And so it just becomes very difficult for us to front the money before the projects are carried out. Okay, next question. Can a police department victim witness assistance unit apply? Absolutely. Any governmental body other than a federal agency is eligible to apply. Is this an electronic application? As Brenda said, the applications are in two formats, a PDF and a Word. Each comes in a computer fillable format, as well as one that you can just print out and fill in. It is not submitted online per se. As Brenda said, the fill-in PDF has a link to launch your email. So by and large, they're submitted either by email, fax, or through the U.S. mail. Is the deadline 11:59 p.m. on August 1st? Yes. Wherever you happen to be, because we're dealing with time zones as far away as Guam. As I said earlier, as a practical matter, if we have it in our hands by Saturday morning, we'll accept it. If the agency is a victim witness unit in a DA's office, would a commissioner be the signatory, or the DA, or the chief of staff of the office? You know, that depends on your own setup, who has the authority to enter into an agreement. It's going to vary depending on the agency and the organization. What we are looking for at the application stage is a commitment that that if awarded the grant, you'll carry it out. We've had situations in the past where somebody's applied, we've reserved the funds, and then they've chosen for one reason or another that they really weren't going to do it. So we're looking for the commitment that if we reserve the funds for your use, that you'll carry out the project. There will be a legal award agreement, and again, the proper person to sign it will be the person who has the authority to commit the agency legally to carrying out the project. I'm not sure what this question is. Okay, there's a question about community coalitions not requiring a DUNS number, yet it seems to be a required field. perhaps that's confusing on the form because it says required, but in fact community coalitions do not require a DUNS number. Otherwise it is required. That is a federal requirement. We're not allowed to enter into any funding agreement to any agency other than a community coalition that does not have a DUNS number. I think I've answered that question about who's the signing authority. In reference to the all types of crime part, is this grant available to agencies having events related to specific crimes? Again, that's a relative matter. The broader the focus of the project, the stronger it will be. There's no absolute line as to the number of victims, except to say that the more you propose to address, the broader the audience, the stronger the application will be considered. Okay, there's several along those lines. I think that may have answered it. Joined late. My question is, does the DA's office qualify for funding for our annual candlelight vigil? Yes, they would be eligible depending on the strength of the proposal. State agencies are eligible. Can the presentation be emailed to us? No, but it will be online and you can download it from our website. Are activities to be conducted daily during National Crime Victim Rights Week? They don't have to be done daily. We focus on activities during Crime Victim Rights Week. We recognize that there are sometimes we'll say during or in close proximity to, because sometimes it may be the week leading up to, sometimes like at the national level, they used to have events the week before Crime Victim Rights Week. We don't want to get too far away from the designated week. If you're going to do something in December, that obviously is going to be not related to Crime Victim Rights Week. So the answer is no, it doesn't have to be done every day, and it should be during or as close to Crime Victim Rights Week as you can possibly make it. Can funds be used to pay for expenses to bring in out-of-town guest speakers? Yes, subject to the cost limitations that Brenda described, and you'll find more information on that in the applicant guide. So I really, we really require you actually to read the guide and follow that. If we order T-shirts, can we work with a local vendor and add additional logos to recognize victim rights partners? Those logos would be provided in kind by the local vendor. Yes. You can add other logos. Part of the idea of increasing public awareness of rights and services to victims is that local agencies will use Victim Rights Week to make people know of the availability of their services. In some cases, they publish directories. They'll have bookmarks, other materials, which you will see once OVC gets their materials online, that you can customize for your own local uses. Along those lines, let me just say that, again, we're looking at this as a Victim Rights Week activity. We're not looking to replenish your agency's supply of brochures that you'll use for the whole year. So it really has to focus on Crime Victim Rights Week and not simply a local agency material. Okay. Is there a way to see a completed example or an applicant that uses best practices? Unfortunately, we've changed the application, and we really don't have suggested sample applications, but they're pretty straightforward. I would just emphasize, keep it simple, concise, and to the point. What is the likelihood that you will be funded if you have been funded in 2014? Again, that's a relative matter. There are some agencies that have gotten funded in repeated years, so I can't answer what the likelihood is. I'd say submit your application and do the best you can. Will the slides be available at the end of the webinar? They will be on our website. My organization's logo is permitted to be printed along with the NCVRW. I guess it's a question. Is it? Yes. You can publish your agency's logo on the promotional items. Okay. Is a $6.50 speaker fee total a per person total or a total between all speakers? It is a per speaker total. It's a per daily speaker total. So if you're bringing somebody in to speak and they'll be speaking on, say, 2 different days, you can give them $6.50 for each day, for each speaker. What are AV costs? AV are audio-visual costs. If you're putting on an event, you need to rent a projector or a DVD player or a sound system or something along those lines. Those are AV or audio-video costs. Can we still go to $20 on trinkets with federal funds as a sponsor? Can we still go to $20 on trinkets with federal funds as a sponsor pays for setup and shipping? I guess if somebody is donating setup and shipping, that would not be included then in your $20. It's the $20 federal funds, not. So if you're not paying for setup and shipping, if that's donated, you would not include that in your costs. Just to clarify, not being able to augment costs with other funding sources are donations of spaces, equipment, someone's time acceptable? Yes. The only thing that we're talking about that can't be augmented with donations or contributions are the speaker fee. I would just caution you, as Brenda alluded to, if somebody's donating something that's not allowable, a bit of advice. You're having an event at noon and somebody is donating food. Don't call it a lunch. If somebody's donating food, there are requirements that there be a disclaimer, that it be noted either at the source or in a program that the federal government is not paying for it. But for the purposes of the application, if you call that a luncheon, it'll only draw attention to the fact that there'll be food served there, even if the food is not budgeted with federal funds. So it's just a matter of avoiding that, raising the question and avoiding the confusion over who's paying for what. There is a section for you to identify contributions and collaborators and co-sponsors, and that's where you can list that. Clarification on the $6.50 not to be augmented. Does that mean if there is a speaker for $1,000, we cannot get that speaker by using $6.50 in federal funds plus $3.50 from other sources? That's correct. You cannot pay that speaker $1,000 even if it's supplemented with funds from other sources. Can we utilize the funds to purchase rights to show a video at our event? That would be an allowable expense. Is rental of a tent and chairs an allowable cost? Yes. If a speaker cannot do the week of April 19th to 25th, but they can April 17th, can our event be that day? Yeah, probably. Again, we're going to look at the proximity to Crime Victim Rights Week. If it were the 17th, it would probably not be as much a problem as if it were in November. Is the speaker coming and offering training okay as long as it is open to the public? Training is a term that raises questions. What do you mean by training? Again, this is to raise public awareness and events, public awareness of rights and services. What do you mean by training? If it's a professional training, the answer is no. So that's one of the terms we run into a lot. It simply raises a question as to what do you mean by training, and so just be careful if you use that term to explain how that increases the general public's awareness of victims' rights and services. Training to me seems to focus on something that's offered to a more limited group, and so again, you need to explain what it is and who it's going to be targeted for. Simply the fact that you say, okay, anybody can come in, but nobody's going to know about it is probably not going to be the strongest proposal. Okay. Earlier you mentioned not mentioning food refreshments even if donated, but now you say to identify. Okay, when I say you have to identify it if it's donated, I'm talking about at the event. If you're having a vigil and somebody's providing, say, some treats or something, at the event it has to be identified that the food and beverages and refreshments are not being funded with federal funds. So just to clarify, I would avoid mentioning it in the application because it will raise questions. You might want to list it as in the section on co-sponsors, but at the event, if there is donated food or refreshments, it's got to be clear at the event, either through a sign or through a disclaimer in a program, that the federal government is not paying for the food and refreshments. Can we request funding for a mass media campaign that focuses on victims of domestic and sexual violence, creating awareness of our local domestic? The answer is yes. Again, the broader the message, the stronger the application will be considered. If we have PSAs already recorded, would you recommend that we build a budget to include an edit for appropriate branding, or should we utilize existing? I can't answer that question. That's a very specific question that that you'll have to think through yourself. Does the event need to be during Victim Rights Week or the month of April? Again, it'll be a relative thing that that will be judged on its merits. I think we already answered that. Does not recently funded projects include new projects by previously funded organizations? Yes. If the agency or the organization has received funds, then we'll consider that as a recently funded project. Do all promotional materials need to have NCVRW logo info on them? Yes. You know, it sort of depends on what the object is, or I mean, if you're doing a whistle, and you may not be able to have a long theme or message, but you're using the right colors, then that will be acceptable. We will look at this at the end to make sure that the materials do conform in some way to Victim Rights Week. It's impossible to say that everything has to have the logo itself on it, since we don't know what the logo is going to be this year, but it has to be connected in some way to Victim Rights Week. Clarifying budget breakdown: do not include donated items such as food and beverages in the budget. That's right. Don't include anything that's not allowable in the budget. And in the budget section, don't put down things that are being donated or contributed. Sometimes we've seen an item and then it'll put down cost 0. We're only interested in the budget section in what the federal funds will be used for. If you are a local government and applying for the grant on behalf of another agency, how should the organizational name be listed on the application? It's the agency that will be accepting the funds that will be legally responsible for carrying out the project. If it's a local, say, prosecutor's office applying on behalf of the local task force, you can explain that in the description. You can explain that in the section having to do with the mission and experience. But as far as the name of the organization, it'll be that entity that will be legally responsible for carrying it out. It's the name of the agency we're going to be writing the reimbursement check to. Think of it that way. We would like to pay for the rights to show a documentary film. Is this an allowable cost? Yes, it is. We want funding for a future event for promotional items. Is that possible? Only as far in the future as Victim Rights Week 2015. We are not paying for future events. If you have recently been funded, do you recommend applying for funding? I can't make a recommendation. If you've been recently funded, you'll be eligible and considered. Our main goal is monies for public service announcement. Is that a good or bad? I can't answer what's good or bad because they're going to be evaluated against everybody else's proposal. Project narratives must be clear to specific victims of crime. Not sure I understand that question. Yes, it must be specifically related to victim rights and services. A lot of our staff who will work on this project is new. Is there a way to confirm with you whether or not we have received funding in the past? There is on our website a list of previous recipients going back to 2004. You can check that. It may not explain, it may not identify major co-sponsors of previous events, but on our website there is a page that you can go to look up whether an organization has received grants in the past. Okay, once again, the theme is, Brenda, what's the theme?
Engaging communities, empowering victims.
Okay. Is collaboration a requirement of the project, or does it just make the proposal stronger? It makes the proposal stronger. It is, as Brenda announced earlier, it's one of the items that the reviewers will be giving a score to. So if it's blank, it will not receive any score. Can you hold two events in two separate counties for the same program which serves both areas? Yes. Is there a limit on the number of grant awards? If you're talking about the number of awards any one agency can receive, we've only awarded one grant per agency. We haven't really considered in the past multiple applications from the same agency. Is there a limit on the number of grant awards in total? That's going to depend on the total cost of the awards and the total amount of funds we have available. We're expecting no less than 60 will be awarded. It looks like we'll probably be awarding more than that, but I can't say how many. When will we be able to access the application? The applications have been available since July 1st. Go to our website and there's a link that says applications and you can download the forms from there. Could Brenda please say the theme one more time?
Okay, I'll say it slowly. Engaging communities, empowering victims.
Thank you. Do you require a collaboration between agencies in order to approve a project? Again, collaboration is a weighted criteria. The more community support and involvement, the stronger your application will be. Can we do radio ads? Yes. Does $650 speaker include costs for travel, lodging, per diem? No. The $650 is only the fee to the speaker for their time. In addition to their fee, you can reimburse them for their actual reasonable out-of-pocket costs for travel. Brenda showed you a website. The General Services Administration lists the per diem, the allowable maximums for every city in the country. So it's gsa.gov and then click on per diem. If space is donated, do we submit it in the budget? No, it's not a cost that we would be reimbursing you for. If we are hosting an event and have attendees pay for the cost of their own food, where should that be documented in the application? I would not document that in the application. That is an expense they're paying for and is not being paid for by the federal government. If you talk about it, it's only going to raise the question as to who's paying for it and are federal funds being used. If promotional materials are purchased for 200 participants and the actual number falls far short, can these materials be distributed to different organizations afterward? We're going to look at the number. You're going to be asked to report to us the number of items you've produced and the number you distributed. If there's a large discrepancy, we will follow up to find out why that occurred. as I said earlier, these funds are not intended to be used to simply replenish an agency's supply of their own materials or brochures. Obviously, if there's a reasonable explanation, we'll accept it, such as the actual number falling short. If you purchase 200 of something and only one person shows up, we'll probably question it. Okay, is the application on your website? Yes. Go to cap.navaa.org, and there's a link to applications, and you can download them there. And that's all the questions we have right now. We will be posting this presentation and the slides on our website. We don't want to be in a position to answer individual questions that relate to the weight or suggestions of specific applications. We want to be fair to everybody who's going to apply, and we don't want to give any one person any individual or tailored information. So that is why we will post the recording. Everybody will have access to not only the presentation, the slides, but the answers to the questions that we've been responding to. So with that, I want to thank you all for attending, and hope you all that we see applications submitted by each of you. Thank you very much, and good day.